Jacob, sit down in the middle. Fill the seat.
They're not going to.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Come on.
It's perfectly
Come on.
okay.
Here we go.
We're going to start,
Mr. Milner.
if that's good with everybody. Just to introduce myself, I'm Nelda Roger, and I'm the editorial director at Azure magazine. And you have copies of it all over your chair, in case you were wondering. And I'm going to do just one little plug, hope you don't mind. Just in case you don't know, Azure is holding the gala for our awards on the 23rd of June at the Brickworks. It's a pretty great event. We host winners and finalists from all over the world actually come to get their awards at this event, and it's exciting. We have a guest of honor, Massimiliano Fuxas, who's coming from Italy. He's the man, in case you didn't know, who designed the fairgrounds at Rho in Milano, and many other amazing projects. Yes, he did Shenzhen Airport, yeah. And he did the big Congress Center that just opened in Rome. So that should be pretty exciting. He's also speaking the next day. The lecture is free. If you go to our website, you'll find out where to sign up for that. So that's the end of my commercial. And I'm going to introduce the speakers tonight. Some need no introduction, especially as this is their home base, but I'm going to introduce my friends, George Yabu and Glenn Pushelberg. Pretty well everyone here knows the story behind Glenn and George, how they started their firm together when they were barely out of diapers. Freshly graduated from Ryerson's Interior Design School. How they went from the early days of designing copy shops and dry cleaning depots onto edgy clubs and fast fashion shops to becoming a global force, lending their signature polished style and deft touch with rarefied materials to high-end hotels and upscale shopping destinations all over the world. Those who know them well, longtime staffers here, friends and industry insiders, will be familiar with a bit of a wild side. A serious funny bone,
Yeah.
and a true gusto for life and travel. I'd say they have spent each at least a quarter of their lives on a plane, and perhaps Glenn is getting closer to 50%. And judging by how youthful they both look, time definitely does not pass more quickly at higher altitudes. Just don't believe them. They have been widely celebrated, and deservedly so, receiving every industry accolade worth mentioning. And in 2013, they were appointed Officers of the Order of Canada. I think they should be named cultural ambassadors, as they represent quintessential Canadian attributes. They are funny, talented, sophisticated, intelligent, and great designers.
Oh, so kind.
And next, I'm introducing Yuichiro Hori. I've had the pleasure of meeting Yuichiro Hori only recently, and I was very impressed with his accomplishments. Yui, as he calls himself, is the founder of Stellar Works, a furniture brand that is barely 5 years old, but has already attained global recognition. Based in Shanghai, where Yui has lived for nearly 20 years, Stellar Works has taken on the task of bridging East and West by uniting modern design ideas with aspects of ancient Eastern forms and traditions. Under the art direction of Shanghai and London-based architects Lyndon Neri and Rosanna Hu, of Neri and Hu Design and Research Office, Stellar Works has created a collection of furniture. A few of the pieces are on display here that embodies Yuichiro Hori's concept of timeless design. This concept is based on rigorous sourcing of appropriate and resilient materials and an age-old crafts tradition. Through a commitment to quality and accountability, Stellar Works and Yuichiro Hori are transforming the label Made in China from a handicap to an asset. And
I'm nervous right now. Whatever you're going to follow that up.
All 100%.
Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Tell that.
I always
leave the
tell
room?
them. You can leave the room.
Don't gloss over it.
All right. Klaus Nienkamper II grew up with a designed spoon in his mouth. And it couldn't have been any ordinary spoon, considering that his family has everything to do with the beginning of modern design culture in Toronto. You could also say Klaus cut his teeth working in his father's factory, where he got first-hand experience in the manufacturing of high-end furniture. He eventually migrated to sales, and considering his charming disposition and winning smile, that was a no-brainer.
Right. Thank you.
In 2002, Klaus took over the Nienkamper showroom on King Street East, and soon after rebranded the flagship as simply Klaus. It is now known as the place for an exclusive blend of mainly European furniture and accessories, among which classics and other collections with a distinctive edge, a characteristic that Klaus himself shares. Klaus has been a strong supporter of the Canadian design community, as his family before him, and the King Street showroom lives on as a legend for throwing the best parties ever. Klaus is the proud local outlet for Stellar Works brand.
Thank you.
And here we go. So my first question goes to George.
Me, okay.
Yeah. There's an obvious parallel for those of us in the West between histories of made in China and made in Japan. For the benefit of those in the audience who did not experience the evolution of made in Japan and who know only the excellent raw denim that country produces, could you please give us a bit of background on what made in Japan meant when you were young, and did it affect you personally?
I guess that's two questions.
Yeah,
First
they are
one
two
is,
questions. Start with the first.
One of them was it was the administrative issue. Was Japan, after the war, was defeated, as most of us or all of us know, and it was administered by another country, by the USA. And so it was basically a country was trying to, with the help of an agreement with the US, trying to put the country back together after it was obliterated. And so what they had to do is ramp up production, bring industry into line as quickly as possible. And in some ways, it was forced upon by another country to produce inexpensive product to export to the world so that both countries benefited. First benefit was, of course, to rebuild the country. Second benefit was for the host country to get something out of it. It's just part of capitalism. So that wasn't maybe the best way to build your country back up in your economy, because it foisted upon the whole country a sense of that whatever came out of that country was inferior and not made well. And it sort of didn't go with the mindfulness that the country created, society created over a number of centuries. And but once they got back if they got the economy going, they thought, we better, when we do something, we'll do it well. I say myself half Japanese. I was born in Toronto. And one of the things that changed perception of Japanese design was the Sony Walkman. I don't know if some of you remember that. Somebody may not know what the Walkman is. And it was a beautiful piece of pure design. And that really changed the perception of what's possible, what really could come out of the country.
Yeah.
So I'll just leave it at that. And then from history, there's a rapid change.
But I think the parallels really have to do with the idea also of made in Japan was synonymous with something that was cheap.
Yes. So when you see a lot of those products, you'd say, it would say made in occupied Japan.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It was really interesting.
Do you have anything to add?
And the reason why they put that on and said, oh, okay, it was overseen by the US. It can't be that bad.
Right. And how did that feel for you as a Japanese Canadian?
Oh, my father, it was really hard on me. So you gotta make it, not make it right, but he said, you have to do the best, and whatever you're going to do, you better do the best and produce the best thing. And
because it was
it was very strong.
For,
yeah, it was very,
for
very
Japanese
and then you go
culture.
to school, then the pressure at school, they would use that, as a pressure point or a way of discriminating, subtle discrimination. So toughened you up.
Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
there's somewhat of a parallel going on in China today, where it's a second kind of generation of there's wealth being generated, and there's a pride of purpose and a pride of identity of being Chinese today, and you see a regurgitation of, we went in the 1989 to Shanghai, and there were no automobiles, and then within the span of 27 years, it's not only caught up, but it's surpassed in many ways in terms of the sophistication of road systems, in terms of the sophistication of buildings, but it started very simply, and I think there's this element of achievement and sense of purpose that comes from maybe history or cultural identity that kind of creates this drive to, I have achieved, I am looking after my family, there's money, there's pride of purpose. So that inflection point.
Yeah.
That China's coming to. Anyway,
I'm going to pass this one over to Yuichiro. So I'd like to pick up the conversation from there, that parallel with Made in Japan works only to a certain extent, because the cheap products that were being made and produced, they were made by Japanese companies for export to the West. But Made in China had a different origin. Can you talk to us a bit about that?
I'm living in Shanghai for 18 years, and I moved to Shanghai from Tokyo. It was 99, and I think it's at that time, maybe even now, I'm really feeling like Shanghai or China, and the current production environment is very similar to the past in Japan. It's like 1960s and 70s, because at that time, Japanese manufacturers, everybody is mainly exporting to US or North America because of a competitive price. And everybody is competing on a price point. But afterwards, Japanese manufacturer, they are facing the big problem, because after 80s, their cost is no more competitive. So that case, including the furniture industry, most of the furniture factory, they have to close down because of the cost. And but some of the company who is still surviving, it's just like a Sony, which you mentioned, the Sony or Toyota. I think this company, I would say they have the certain creativity or like R&D ability internally. So I think in China, they are still promoting their competitive price, but sooner or later, that could be no more competitive.
Right.
In that case, China they have to think about the same problem, same as Japan in the past, I think.
You did talk to me also about the fact that Chinese companies really got their start producing for OEMs.
Because
for other manufacturers. So the Chinese were building parts, or they were building even product, but that were being branded under someone else's brand. Never a Chinese brand, but always a...
The B&B Italians and the casinos. It's not the hidden secret that they are making things in China.
They're changing, but China, they start, most of the business, they are OEM manufacturer. So they said, if you give me the drawing, I will make something for you. But that means their business has no creativity, but just focusing on production. But because I think it's a creativity or design ability, it comes from the lifestyle, or like I think it's a later stage. So most of a company, they do just an OEM production. And that means OEM production must have very competitive price point or very unusual exclusive skills. Right? It must be two ways. But for China, in the past, it's very difficult to have very exclusive skills, right? So yeah, this is the currently they're doing now.
They're competing on price. For the
Yeah.
most part. Yeah. So over to you, Glenn. I'd like to talk about what it's like to design for manufacture in China. What are the capabilities now in China, and how do they differ from European or North American manufacturers' toolboxes and skill sets? Are you designing differently for production in China?
No. Oh, do you want me to expand on that? Yeah. 20 years ago, yes. Today, no. 20 years ago, I mean, there are countries in the world like India, et cetera, that we're working in where you have to understand what the skills are, what the limited skills are and what they aren't, and you have to design to it. But in China today, as I kind of started to point out, in 25 years, it's transformed itself from catching up, to want to be something, to catching up, to at the point of inflection of starting to lead and have self-confidence. And I think that in terms of manufacturing, the perfect example is Stellarworks, using European equipment, Japanese on-time management systems, and tapping into a tradition of craftsmanship, of the ability to make things, especially wood-based objects. But even I was astounded at your upholstery shop, which is always problematic in emerging countries because there's a skill to that doesn't seem obvious, that is obvious, and it's as good as anywhere. So, and there are other companies like yours that are doing different things than you're doing, like store fixtures. When we were working for Barney's in New York, all of the manufacturing was done in southern China in a factory that had American management systems, and they were specifically looking at the monobrand.
So they would have had all of the equipment
They have
that
all the
anyone in
equipment
Europe would
and
have.
expertise, and I think in China, whether they're owned by foreigners or they're owned by Chinese, there's an intelligence of bringing the expertise they don't have,
Right.
rather than wholesale buying it and then adopting it and learning from it. Are there other countries in the world where let's just buy it?
What about communication? Like, how do you communicate with those factories? Do you communicate through drawings, or are there conversations?
It's kind of come full swing that in the early 90s it was difficult because you had to have translators and stuff, and then as they wanted to become Chinese became more international, they kind of supported English as the language of communication for business. And now with greater self-confidence, in some situations it's swung back. So you have to. We want our contracts written in Chinese. We want communication. Bring your own, which is somewhat interesting. But I mean, generally, English is an international business language. Not really a big issue, I don't think. Is it,
So,
Julia? Okay, Julia does procurement.
I have a question that came up from the audience about Stellarworks, and I guess it's not quite clear to everyone how Stellarworks works. So maybe Yuichiro, you could explain that, like how your company works.
I think it's our company. Our strategy is we saw the big potential production capability in China, but we just realized that China is just a lack of knowledge for detailing, or that's lack of conscious, and also like efficiency. So we brought like a factory operation system from Japan, and we hired people from Toyota Motors, and they have a Toyota production system that is not only the car industry, but also quite useful for all of factory operation, very efficient and like a best quality control or this kind of system.
How many people work in the factory?
Sorry?
How many people work in the factory?
Our factory, it's nearly 400 people now. Yeah.
Wow,
Okay.
it's large.
And
4 years, 5 years.
Five, almost
yeah,
five.
5 years. And also, this is our company joint venture between Japanese and French. I'm Japanese side founder, but my partner is the French company called Laval. They are the oldest factory in France and best manufacturer who is producing for Hermes, Christian Diego, so this kind of high-end manufacturer. And so we brought the technical know-how from France and bring it to China, and operational know-how from Japan, but using Chinese production environment and resource. So this is our company. So what we're doing, and also capability and also like a cost. It's quite useful and it's kind of ideal environment. But production side, we cannot make a decision only with a cost, because production environment, that means we have to get the right technician, quality workers, or we have to get very strong logistic. We have to get the right material. So it's not only the cost. Everybody's thinking like an ideal production environment is a cost, but it's not only the cost. Cost must be affordable, but material is important, and technician is important. And one of the strengths in China is still like 1.5 billion people living in China. I don't know, actually maybe more. And compared to Vietnam, many people say, oh, Vietnam is cheaper than China. But actually, the cost is more expensive because most of the material they are buying from China. China is a factory of the world, so they are making most of the material. So, and also they are very easy to find the good workers. And that's impossible in Japan because when I start a factory, I need 100 workers at least. But I was supposed to set up a factory in Japan. But how to get 100 workers who has like 10 years working experience or woodwork? It's impossible, or I get from the students. But China is like very young people, like 20s or 30s, but still like they have more than 10 years or 20 years working experience already because of our population. So lots of strengths in China, I think.
I know we're not.
Go.
We have been working on a micro hotel project, which is small scale hotel rooms. And one of the notions of the project was to do fold up furniture that hangs on the wall, unfolds and stuff. And so there's the chair is metal, wood, rubber bumpers, canvas, leather, like 4 or 5 materials coming together. Yeah. So a complicated chair, but a simple chair. And I don't know if I ever told you this, but so when we had the chair priced with StellaWorks, we had the chair priced by a company in Quebec, and we had the chair priced by a factory near Udine in Italy, just to see from a qualitative and quantitative view of what a value for money proposition. And of course, the winner was StellaWorks because they encompassed all the necessary things for quality. And in a hotel room, the chair's got to last a long time. And this is a chair's got to fold up and unfold and fold up. So it's got to pass all of those tests, more than what you would get at IKEA. And it was, I think the cost of the chair was like $200.
Did they all prototype one too? Did they all prototype one too? Or?
Yeah. I don't think. You know what?
Curious.
We didn't bother going that far
Right.
with them because it was so far. The range was so different, and we already understood the capability.
Right.
But we could have. But it wasn't even worth considering. So.
So
It
Klaus,
kind
I
of
want
talks
to
to
bring...
where the future of the whole industry can go and probably will go at some point.
We're going to get to that.
Okay, I know.
Klaus, how is the North American market responding to high-end design that's made in China? Is there a backlash? Why or why not?
I don't really know how much people really want to know where things are made, quite honestly, and I don't think that the price point can be even considered, like if it's made elsewhere for certain larger projects and so on. So do people really ask the question? I don't think really so much anymore as they might have when they were talking about made in China reproductions. That was a big deal. Reproductions was a huge backlash. That really painted the whole scene poorly, and then, but the reality is...
They lost the trust that they had to build up again, right?
And depending on what product we're talking about, if it's lighting, electronics, the componentry, India, China, and then they come together somewhere else, and then they ship somewhere else. So the questions really aren't asked.
So in the furniture industry, you don't get that question. So people don't specifically say where in fact is this made?
No.
No. And
No,
designers don't ask those questions either?
No.
No?
It's more of a quality standpoint.
It's from a quality
Maybe
standpoint.
some do. I don't know. But I have never heard it.
In other industries, there are those questions are asked, maybe not in...
In the fashion industry, the
fashion
question is asked now. And
also in food
I
processing.
don't know how
Yes.
you can ask the question. You're talking about an $1,100 lighting fixture. You just how can you ask that question even? It's not possible.
But
Yeah.
there is.
I mean, within their own country, their own people, they have a mistrust of how food is processed in China.
Right.
So they invest in for producing sausages. They buy the whole business in the U.S. and transport the technology knowledge and the sanity standards there, and they become winners. So they just have to.
There is an issue that still exists, and somewhat it is a bigoted issue, and somewhat it's a real issue of this reproducing of originals or knocking things off, and that was a part of that exists and that existed. But there's a greater, I think the Chinese people themselves have a greater knowledge of what is real value and what's not, and a sense of quality as their quality of life increases. And I think that companies like Stellar Works have proven that you don't need to go down that road. And it's at the forefront of change, which will also change perception and the reality of it.
Okay. So this one's for you, George. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the stigma that's been associated with Made in China has a xenophobic component? And I have one other question that's associated to that. How much of it can be attributed to fear in the West of China dominating the world economy, if in fact
Well,
there is?
yes, geopolitics have a big influence on what's on people's minds. At the same time, Klaus, you mentioned that there's a lot of Chinese people in the world, right? Particularly in Canada, and so quickly became from a agrarian culture just a generation ago
20 years
to
ago.
the second most powerful, strongest economy in the world. That's pretty impressive. Mm-hmm. So you got to give them, full credits for that. I think over time, it's projected that they will be the number one economy in 2040 something. Mm-hmm. And of course, like Americans, like all the ones that are in power now, they're freaked out. They're freaking out and they don't want to face it. So there's that resistance.
Well, there is that worry of loss of manufacturing jobs.
They're not
we've been hearing a lot of that.
So they just blame it on, when it's easy, you blame
it on Made in China.
Yeah, yeah. But that's the way the world goes. Everybody had their dynamic, the epoch, the Romans had their moment, the Greeks before them, and on and on and on and on. It's, the way of the world. Fear.
I mean, it's like even the maturing of their government in terms of how they view themselves and how they view themselves as less as outsiders, as trying to be integrators in the world. And you can say that's somewhat not altruistic, but in other cases is understanding your position in the world and being as part of it. I think we have this project called the Chinese Sky Club at the top of the Freedom Tower in New York, which is a private club for Chinese and American diplomats to meet. And, there's Henry Kissinger and Madeleine Albright have already had made talks there at the construction site, and they talked about the change in China, but how China wants to understand America better and have America understand them better, and this vehicle to do that. So, when they were talking that night, the administration that's currently in America had just been elected, and they said, well, they're naive in their approach, and that will change because there are two economies that are parallels. And so I think that this fear of China taking over is also a kind of it's bogus. I think the world works like that.
If I may go back to that question. Because my parents are Japanese, and I'm thinking back at the heyday in the 80s before the bubble broke, and going to Japan so many times, and the stuff that my parents had at home. I lived with these, I grew up with these crazy devices that would create interesting things that would, the perfect shape for a rice cake that was, like a press, and it was a cherry blossom, and I was fascinated at my mother, popping these things out in this strange, devices, but they were kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And so I think the mentality of Japanese is we're I don't think they saw it in a bigger picture. I think it was a bit more we're doing it for ourselves.
Right.
This is what we want. So we're going to make it as best we can because we like it. So that's a level that we're...
So you see the Chinese doing a similar thing? Like
Chinese, it's different because they're, now that there's more, the world is more global, connected, information crosses back and forth much quicker. I think they're responding to a need to satisfy a market or areas of the market. There's a need for the things that they can produce, but they're not producing it for either the emotional connection for themselves.
Not up to this point.
That there's a kind of base, if you're comparing Japan and China, there's a kind of different notion of rigor or importance to process,
right?
Which has a direct bounce to the end result. Where working in Japan is you can spend a 3-year project. You'll spend 2 years planning the project and a year of perfect execution. And historically in China, unless you've got kind of the more layers that they're learning or about earning from the West or other Asian countries is let's build it. We want it the best, but let's build it fast, and then we'll figure out the problems later, and we'll rebuild the parts that didn't work. Right? That's kind of, but it's more this, which is also kind of interesting because you have this enthusiasm and outpouring of go, but then you've got all these issues of like, then how do I get it back to where it needs to be? And part of it is a different psyche. Part of it is like even in Hong Kong, it's a kind of structural system where the rent on a store is 3 years, where here it's 10 years. So I got to build it fast to get it open, and then I'll fix whatever I have to do, but I got to get it open. And it's not necessarily not valuing a sense of quality. It's a process of getting there in a different way.
I think in North America also that there's been some worry around the stuff that China does because they do it on such an amazing scale.
Scale and speed.
Scale and speed and sometimes...
And that's the biggest difference between Japan and things.
Right.
Fast and speed is not an issue on more artful things like hand saw. The function, it's driven by function first. So what we're used to in the West is, let's say, a saw. You'd push and push and push. And so sometimes if you're not mindful or careful, it wobbles, right?
Right.
But in Japanese saws, it's always pulling. So you're pulling across, and you never get that deflection. It's not very accurate. It's very simple things.
Yeah, and also like China, one of the strong point is that all of the land is owned by government. So all of the development is very fast. Yep. And I heard from the Mori Buildings, one of the biggest Japanese developer. They said they had a big land. They developed a big land in Shanghai, and the same size as the Tokyo they developed in the past. But they said why they are taking the risk and investing in China. And he said he took 25 years to get the land in Tokyo because all of the land is owned by like a private, and he has to negotiate one by one at 25 years just to develop the same scale. But China and Shanghai is just 1 year. Before I saw a picture, but more than 3,000 small houses in the land. But 1 year later, I saw the picture from sky. It's really nothing within 1 year. It's very fast. And also
a little terrifying fast.
It's maybe too fast.
Yeah.
And also, last year, how many hotels was open in China in 1 year? Who knows that? How many hotels? I don't say super cheap hotels, but only certain level of the hotels. How many hotels in China? It just opened last year. It's 760 properties. 760 hotels, and only in Shanghai city is 54 properties. 4-star, 5 stars. It was open last year. It's just 1 year. It's without any renovation, without any under construction properties. So that means 760 property means they are hiring 760 different designers. And different, of course, it's impossible to hire just a Chinese, but it should be international. Everybody come to China. And our manufacturer side, because lots of top designers coming, because strong economy, that means the owner has a budget. And the difference from Japanese owner is Chinese owners, when they want to develop the hotel in my town, he said, I don't care about the budget. I want to do something best. Really the best. So I need the best brand, I need the best designer and the best quality. And he asked me, so I don't care about the cost, but you have to give us the best thing.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's a lots of like design movements because of a strong economy that brings very good top quality design, and also manufacturers, they are trying to catch up these demands. So lots of material development or design movement is happening. Because they start from OEM manufacturing, but now they are trying to be more like a creative, or they are trying to create a brand, so trying to be more like a design-oriented company. This is a movement in China, and most of the people still don't know, but this is a fact.
If this rush of development, they said the economy in China is slowing down to 6.5%. This rush in China, so there's this huge need for not only building things, but for expertise.
Yeah.
So what is happening in the consulting world of interior designers is HBA was sold to a Chinese company, Wilson Associates sold to a Chinese company. Yeah. Many other global design firms have been offered to be sold.
To Chinese companies.
Yeah, many times.
Yeah, you told me that you've had many offers.
Because there's a need.
Yeah.
I think they have I'm working for one project, client CrabMed. CrabMed is owned by a French company before, but now changed to a Chinese owner. And they started development of CrabMed in China, but now they do globally. And they keep investment in overseas. But because of background, they can bring lots of Chinese tourists. They start going outside of China, and they want to buy more like a life experience. So they have a certain confidence that they can bring back their investment quickly. But this is also the other strength in China.
I want to bring you back a bit to design and designers, and just talk for a moment about how, we know it's come up already that B&B is producing some of their work in China. We also know that Miuccia Prada has clothing made in China. As high-end design manufacturing becomes ever more centered in China, what will happen to design and designers? Since traditionally product design has had close ties to manufacturing. In fact, many technological advances in design have come from the factory floor. Will the designers of the near future be Chinese or live in China? So this is for Glenn, George, and Klaus. What do you think? Will designers need to move to where the factories are?
I don't think so.
No?
No.
I don't think so.
Or will the designers become increasingly Chinese?
I think the choices are multiple, and I think that we were talking to a fellow that worked for us years ago. We met in New York last week at one of our events, and he said he's moving to Shanghai. I think he's going to work with Lyndon and Rosanna Neri and Hugh and stuff. And Shanghai is an interesting. The most cosmopolitan city, I think, in China. And so if you're adventuresome, why wouldn't you go there if there's a need to go there? And the Neri News and the Stellar Works of the world are making China what it will become. They're the future of it. So yeah, you can, but you don't need to be close to the factory floor because we're making products that are being made in Indonesia and China, Italy, of course.
What about for technological? Yes, I imagine it does.
In terms of initial prototypes, I wouldn't say prototypes, but in terms of just for scale and proportion.
You need
and then you go to the real prototype.
Right. What about material innovation, Klaus? How would you see that happen? Just the idea.
I want to back up for 1 second. Earlier, we were talking about, do people, are they aware, do they care is made in China? I think it's an accepted thing, and people believe more in the brands that are making the stuff there. So do they believe in Tom Dixon? Do they believe in whoever? Like, that's really the more thing. Do they believe in us? Do we believe in them? Of course, it's made there and so on. So I didn't want to sound negative earlier. But.
No. And so you don't believe that design has any advantage being close to manufacturing?
No.
There might be some advantages, of course. There's nothing like being able to walk out to the factory floor, but at some point, things that are prototyped will be brought to you. You'll go to them. That's what goes.
I'm going to go back that no statement and say maybe yes, somewhat, because we just hired a really talented guy, Matthias, and who worked for Patricia in Italy, and he's bringing stuff to the table because he's exposed more to the manufacturing that goes on there that we hadn't thought of. So there are pros, there are some benefits to being understanding manufacturing, the abilities of ways of doing things that.
Well, I just know from being around design for many years that there's some things that happened over the years, like cartel, for example, is one sort of famous example where all of the material sort of experimentation that went on in their factory.
Yeah.
And then the use of carbon fiber, for example, in the furniture industry was prototyped on the factory floor. It couldn't be done by 3D modeling. If you're working with a brand new material, you really need to be able to get down and dirty with it. And if you're a designer, it really does help you if there's manufacturing close by. And for example, Italy, which really was the cradle of modern design in the last century, all of those small factories in the area just north of Milano, that's where the architects from Milan went, and they would meet the factory owner, they would mess around with materials, and they would come up with something new. So I'm wondering what kind of opportunities there will be for that if everything is made in China.
We're getting a lot of things made in Italy, and even pricing millwork to be exported in another country. And it's become more competitive again because the economy isn't that, it's better now, but they're not humming along at
as
full speed as they used to, and they can fit the project.
And that's kind of because of China also.
Yes.
And also, like in a huge way, their whole textile industry has been hollowed out.
Yes, they would just smile at you before when
I think
you're dreaming, but now it's like a genuine smile, right? In Italy when you go.
But it is more fluid, and I think it depends on the exact situation. We have a project with Laufen. We're starting a project with Laufen and their expertise.
Laufen Swiss bath.
The Swiss, they thin-walled ceramics, which a lot of people can't do and don't do. And to start the project is a two-day kind of tour, get to know you, define the project parameters.
Yeah.
And yes, it's beneficial, and it is. You always learn something about going to a factory, that's for sure. It's not only about examining the ergonomics and look and feel of the first time. Even we're doing a chair project in Udine, a wood chair project, and the drawings were done, and with the designers who went there, and it was on the second prototype, and we kept drawing on the chair itself to refine the curves and that, not only for the ergonomics, but what the chair looked and felt like.
And I guess that's still possible if you travel to China and visit the factories. It's just farther.
It's like what's
more
the
time on a plane?
Really, what is the difference between 7 hours of going to China going to Italy and 17 going to China?
I don't think everything makes
10.
But really, I mean, in terms of life, in terms of a day of traveling.
But I don't think everything logistically makes sense being made in China anyhow. There's certain things that just don't make sense to be made there. And certain things people don't want to be made there. And they want to have a beautiful Dutch sofa, whatever. Like it's their taste. So
I'm going to move the conversation over to Yuichiro again. Your company is deliberately making a link between the East and the West, putting an emphasis on Asian sensibility and craftsmanship. Does this give you an edge in the local market? You were talking about how Chinese are feeling.
Yeah, because Chinese people, they have a strong culture, so they are, so we have the certain background of Asian sensibility or Asian aesthetics. So that's, I think it's more than welcome for Asian market, even Japanese or Chinese. But my policy is we shouldn't be too much Japanese or too much Chinese. It's more like really neutral. And I would say if a Japanese culture, for example, if we have beautiful kimono in my house, and if I bring it to European market, maybe everybody say, or many people say, oh, this is beautiful. It's good, but many people could be impressed. But very few people buy the kimono because of a different culture. It's not so useful. Lifestyle is different. But if you use a kimono fabric and make a jacket, and that's very new, and it's kind of a cross-cultural approach, and we can bring the most surprise to the market. Always, that's why we said we are never chasing European luxury brands, but we want to be more like an independent positioning, and we represent like Asian sensibility or aesthetics, and always this is our DNA.
It's very much a Japanese answer to a question, because if you look, and this is in a positive way, because if you look at Japan historically, they've been able to maintain their culture in a very strong and clear way, but also be adaptive and be modern and be international in their view of things, but it doesn't diminish that. The question of China would be, because it's not at that point yet, is there's a long cultural history, even deeper than China's, and with this push for modernization and to be modern, and we've seen going to Xi'an, and again 25 years ago, and seeing this beautiful Hutong city, and going back 6 months later, and all being razed for cheap buildings, which is now being regenerated again. Mm-hmm. But then now you hear stories about the fellow that did the Amman Hotel, and he has the biggest inventory of Hutongs in warehouses in China, who's trying to.
The whole town.
Now you see the Chinese kind of grab at what their culture wasn't
saved
what's left of it before it was destroyed. So we can be part of
it would have been submerged.
But
it's excavated everybody, and they were just going to submerge these towns. Like it would be just fully underwater, like Atlantis. And he saved a number of them, and he's rebuilding it and one of them as an Amman resort.
So it'll become some kind
the
of
real deal.
A little bit
cultural,
of a cultural museum.
Yeah. But you see even the government supporting this, holding on to the culture so they don't lose it all. So hopefully.
Well, we met a little over a week ago just to sort of talk about some of the themes that we wanted to raise, and at that time we talked about how time frame is shrinking on production and prototyping in the furniture industry, and how the time required to bring product to market that's usually a slow product like furniture is now approaching a fast product like fashion. Yeah. So how's that playing out, and what do you see? Well, we talked a bit, Klaus, you had some ideas about that in terms of what that brings to market in terms of something like furniture. Do we need fast furniture? Do we want fast
I think
furniture?
there is a lot of fast furniture out there, but I think it still takes time for people to see it. It takes a year or so to accept it, to see it again, see it somewhere else, see it in another publication, then they kind of catches on. Yeah, totally.
2 years later.
Yeah, it takes a couple of years for sure.
We're also at the mercy of, okay, we've done this, now we have less than a year for Sony, the next big furniture fair. So it's sort of similar to fashion. Yeah. So after you do your, fall, spring, summer, and then you do your fall, winter, and then they squeeze in cruise, and blah, blah, blah. So it's that, it is getting similar parallels.
We were talking to Ben Watson, who's the creative director of Herman Miller, and it used to take them 7 years to develop a chair. He's got this big company down to 4 years, and he feels so proud. Well, we do it in 9 months with you, right? It is the process of designing and making does not slow down. The process of designing actually speeds up, because there's so much stuff out there, and how do you make sure that you have a unique perspective on a piece of furniture is not simple, and that it's not derivative, and that it has newness, it has a point of view, that it fits your personal philosophy and also the company you're creating products for philosophy, and the process will continue to get quicker for sure.
Currently, because of internet, the environment is changing a lot, because the customers, their demand is always changing every day. So we also manufacturing side, we have to catch up the demand from the market. That's why we have to be fast, and also we have to think about a way. Right? If we take several years to complete one piece, we cannot catch up this environment.
I also think that even the distributions, I'm sorry, Klaus, but the distribution systems at some point will change, because like you're working directly with him, but in many cases there's a maker, there's the producer, then there's the distributor, and then there's either a specifier and end user, and so there's 4 or 5 points of adding to what the product
It
costs?
depends on the business model, though, of the company. Because some they just go direct, and that's fine. But there are a lot of people that do really want to see it, sit on it, and so on.
I think furniture will always have that need. It's like an automobile. You need to see it. You need
I think
to
they
feel it.
definitely do
But-
when it's a large piece, want someplace to bring it back if there's a
But-
problem like that.
But you know,
that,
I mean,
what problem? I don't know what happened.
we took a challenge of making
Yeah.
a wood-based dining room chair because there's always a need for restaurants and hotels and stuff to have a chair that's going to cost between $600 and $800. And we worked hard in designing this. It wasn't with you guys, but with somebody else. And then all of a sudden, through 4 distribution points, the chair became $1,400. And for the kind of simplicity and honesty of the chair, it didn't look sophisticated.
Right.
And a sophisticated chair like the ones that were in our boardroom that Christophe Delcourt designed are $1,300. People will pay that for that chair. But for something that looks a little bit kind of easy country-ish, even though it takes the same amount of effort, it doesn't have the same amount of visual value to it. And so you look and say, well, there are different ways of selling and telling a story. But you're right, at the end of the day, you can't just do it over the internet. You know?
Yeah, I mean, but despite the variety of what's out there, there is still such a huge demand from designers, like what's new. You know, they don't want to do the same thing over and over. And then in turn puts the pressure on the manufacturer to crank something out year after year. Like, in fact, there's a company we represent, I won't say them, they showed a bunch of stuff at the fair, but didn't manage to release a single item, and that really, really took their mojo big time.
Right. They didn't get any sales.
I guess that happens more often than
It
not.
is kind of funny, though.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen that often that they don't put it out.
They don't put out even one.
Yeah,
item, but I
but-
think many times what you see at a big fair like the one in Milan.
But there's so much demand, you know.
Yeah.
I guess.
I want to open the conversation to the audience, but I have one last question that I want to put to Yuichiro, because I think this is an important one. So made in China has been stigmatized not just for inferior quality, but also for the perceived lack of a level playing field. How have you seen the country change in the last 20 years with respect to worker conditions and environmental protections?
Yeah, it's also when I came to China in '99, and yeah, it's a lot of change. But I would say when I came to Shanghai, I was very surprised because the workers, their skills are so high, and it's so good. But as Japanese, I have a big doubt because why, like, image of made in China or Chinese product is so cheap and the quality is low. And I realized the problem is most of the problem came from the owner of the factory, but not from the technicians. Because owners, I don't think this is the problem from the owner of the factory, but also the buyer is a problem. Because both sides, the buyers, they want like a cheap. Because most of the company, they're working for OEM. So the buyers, they just pick the manufacturer with a reasonable, like a very good price and affordable quality. So nobody, in like a manufacturer side, nobody want to invest for the quality or high-level technicians, but more and more like a mass production, a cheaper solution. So I realized this problem, but reality is that lots of Chinese workers, their skill was so good because they're still 25 years old, but he's working in he's doing like woodwork more than 10 years already. So he knows the wood very well. And when I gave him it's one sample, chair sample, he doesn't have any drawing. And he just saw my chair and he made exactly same. It's a really curving, very complicated chair. Exactly same. And amazing. And also, this was my surprise in the beginning. But now, currently, many manufacturers, they realize they cannot go for the price competition, so too much price competition. And more company, they are trying to bring like a new business model that is like design development. So they are hiring new designers or it's more like
Yui, what about
creative.
quality of life, though, for the people that are working in the factories?
It's also people is changing because before, like 20 years ago, the first nobody knows cocktails. I don't say nobody, but very little people. Right? It's most of the people they don't know cocktail, and some of the older people they don't know coffee, and this information is.
What about like working hours, though? How many hours a week are they working? And what are the conditions like for them?
Yeah, before it's more ready. Now they need more like a private time, and also they want to put more money for lifestyle or experience. Right. So before it's just, they just want to make money or working harder, and also they want to buy maybe like a aircon, right, or washing machine or car, houses. Now maybe it's the different direction. I think, of course, they are changing. So that's why they want to buy.
So you see an improvement in those things?
It's a lot.
In factories across the board, or is it the exception that there's a factory where the workers have decent hours?
I would say factory.
Good air quality, that kind of thing?
Yeah, but if I say 100 factory in China, I would say more than 95 or maybe 90 or 95% factory, they're still same. I would say same. Mm-hmm. But around 5 or even 2-3% of the factory, they are really, really top level in the world. Mm-hmm. Nobody can catch up because China, so there are lots of really advanced machines. Japan, nobody buy the new machines in furniture factory. Their machine is same as 20 years ago. China is different. They're buying new machine every year. Mm-hmm. So of course, environment is totally different. Mm-hmm. So like Apple's iPhone, the same. It's a really top-level manufacturer. But of course, they have low manufacturer. So it's a key point is how to find the right manufacturer in China. I think this is important.
So I want to open it up now. So I'm sure some of you have questions. We need a mic, though, so we'll start there.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the chat. I just wanted to speak about the idea of made in China, and you've all been speaking about it in the context of globalization. So in other words, you speak about the benefits of working in China with respect to a very large skilled population, the ability to use, say, the same materials that you were manufacturing in Italy, for example, but now you can do it in China. Obviously, cost is a major issue. So there are things about working in China that you find you could find anywhere. And so what I found interesting was the story of the kimono and how the kind of overall story, but eventually Glenn said, well, that's a very Japanese response to the question, which I absolutely agree with. So my question is, what is the Chinese response to the question, right? Because China has a very long cultural history, and the story of globalization relative to China does not allow for this specifically Chinese culture to come through.
I think that it's just, to my view as a white guy, it's, you have to get to a point, I think, where economically there's an economic stability and a sense of wealth, and I haven't looked after the bottom line, which is my well-being, my family's well-being, and I have enough money to live and survive, and that's a kind of whatever that means to be middle class, whatever you are in the world. Once you hit that point, I think there's a point of reflection upon what is the next stage of my life personally, and how is it reflected in where I am and who I am. So to try to keep the answer short, I can be more reflective in my past, and my identity as being Chinese becomes more important to me. The ability to create things like art and creativity become more important to me because I have that. I have a little bit of time now. We had this theory about creativity. Creativity flourishes in places where there's enough but not too much, like the Berlins of the world. Okay, I'll be quiet. Hey, George, go.
George has something to say.
No, I just had this. I think a big difference between those two cultures is, I think, historically China they're merchants. It's in their blood for centuries. Commerce, and they're always trading. From the Silk Road on, it's in their mantra. It's in their blood. So they always want to find a need and address it and profit from it. And it's not, and that doesn't mean it's a negative thing necessarily, but they are addressing a demand that was given, that's out there, and they're answering it. And there's a little bit of a difference. That say, I was trying to answer the Japanese response to that, because they were a very closed society, right? Very an island society. They didn't want. That's why Christianity didn't get infiltrated in that, because they didn't let it in.
Right.
And
China did something similar
Yeah.
with.
That's an excellent point you just said, and that's how America lost a $90 billion home furnishings industry. China found the need.
Yep. They just
They're
moved. Yeah.
merchants.
They're
That's what we lost.
They're nimble, and they just went in.
And as much as I go down to the High Point Market and work with those people, and you see those traditional companies down there trying to bring the craftsmanship back, it'll never come back.
Right.
Exactly, and so you couldn't have said that better. Excellent.
I'm not 100% convinced of that, because I think that with some design intervention, even in local North American industry,
bring it back.
You can do pretty amazing things.
We are.
Shinola.
For sure. Shinola is a great example.
We're seeing some really great companies emerging in New York, in Brooklyn, of all places.
Yes.
Furniture manufacturing that's coming in there. You're seeing it in the Carolinas coming back. There is a lot of manufacturing starting to come back. It will never come back to the degree it was. I talk residential. I know that, Klaus, you're talking more on the commercial side, more than likely. But from the residential, you're starting to see some of that innovation coming back.
Mm-hmm. Do we have any more questions? Marlene?
No, that's on me.
Thanks. No, as the time has sped up to actually produce and get a product out there, don't you find that the numbers have also expanded to the fact that there's almost like too much stuff out there right now?
Yeah.
And I just came back from ICFF and I thought, oh my God, it's like a design flea market down here. The booths are smaller, but there's so much stuff. But your story about the kimono, what twigged to me about that is, and also producing here in Canada again, or in North America, period, is that it will be like a cottage industry. It will be perhaps the artisans bringing the spirit to it and the life to it, as opposed to mass production, which is just going to be producing stuff.
I totally agree with that, because when I'm recent visit in Japan the last couple of years, all these little cottage industries are happening, and they're doing it for themselves. They're not they're not exporting it. This is doing our thing. The perfect coffee and the perfect mug that goes with it. They're doing it. It's happening every day. It's part of their life.
But they're not ready to ship it. That's
They
the
don't-
problem.
yeah.
Like I saw the most wonderful thing in ICFF.
Yeah.
Did you see at the Design Within Reach a showroom that had a big shaker display? Did you see that?
No, I didn't see it.
Gorgeous. Best stuff I'd seen.
Yeah.
I asked the guy, they were all enthusiastic showing me. I said, where do I buy it? And they just looked at me like, what are you talking about? but I'm not kidding. And then I followed up with a courteous email and radio silence.
Right.
And that so my attention span is limited, very anyhow. But now give it a week and it's gone. So it's hard for these guys to back it up. If they get an order, say a guy goes to ICFF says, give me 500. He's gonna be like, what the fuck? I can't do it. But he couldn't facilitate it. You couldn't bankroll. I mean, I'm talking like on a.
So we were talking about this a little bit beforehand also, that perhaps our next panel should be made in Toronto.
Yeah, maybe. We're working with Lasvit. Lasvit is a parallel to Stellarburg. So Lasvit is a less than 10-year-old company in the Czech Republic, in Prague. But there's a history of glass making and
Bohemian glass.
And I don't know, the owner is living in Hong Kong, but they're going fast and they're doing great stuff, and they're going to market fast, and the quality's incredible. It's like there's a prototype in 3 weeks. Here's the drawing. There's the prototype.
I think there's an appetite for those kinds of local initiatives,
and
particularly that are design driven. When there's a
As important as
strong design behind it.
Yeah, we need to think about a story behind the products.
Yes.
We are not destroying the environment. We are using the words.
Yeah.
So if we were
It's my conflict is like
to get it
when
done.
I'm buying the words and making the furniture. Just sometimes I have to feel that I might destroy the environment.
Yep.
But that means that furniture must be permanent property for you. But if you buy something like without a story, maybe you get bored in the future and you want to buy the new one. But if you know the story of this material or design history or background, you have a special feeling. motion, and that could be your permanent property to the next generation. This is our commitment. We have to bring, right, with Klaus.
I think that people that buy furniture that has a pedigree to it, that has been well thought through, that has been well made, it's something that you collect. At that level, it's something you collect. You can be very commercial, and you can make great restaurant chairs and stuff. But at the really best level, it's something that you buy, and so it's an emotional purchase rather than. And it's got to be something that you can't find at IKEA.
Yeah, I think
that would be the biggest challenge. I was going to say that was would be the biggest challenge of your idea of
Made in Toronto.
Made in Toronto. Toronto has a branding challenge. Itself, so we have to start from.
Well,
we have to dig deeper
China
to start the foundation.
has a branding challenge, so that's what we're here to discuss.
I think they will overcome it, if not through.
I think so
through
can we.
the order of because the higher government administration said you will solve it. I think they will. Eventually, they're going to solve and create a real marketable, profitable green industry like never before because of that. And before that, there's no incentive. There's no financial incentive. That's why there's no advances in green technology in the last 20, 30 years because it was too expensive to do. And so now it's getting now
that the price point is higher,
down,
there's
and
more
they're
potential for that.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? Catherine.
I just had a question about the
Mike.
Italian. Oh, sorry. The response in Milan, because Stellarworks' model is very much like an Italian company. It feels very small. It's sort of the quality is so important. Have you found in the response to Italians, are they positive? Do they like to have this Chinese company coming in? I know that you didn't show at the Salon de Mobile. You were showing off-site. I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that. If there's, because you are, you're not a threat, I guess, but you are definitely a wave of the future.
Yeah.
That is evident.
Can I say the fact? It's difficult to go into Fiera, that exhibition center, because of specific reason. And the people, I think, Italian Furniture Association, I don't know who, they might feel that China is taking the business from Italian manufacturers, a kind of enemy, and it's a sensitive issue for them.
And real.
Yeah,
I think I understand
yeah, and or maybe because of a copy issues, they are making lots of copy. And when I have a meeting with B&Bs, it's a funny stories. Like they have the other brand Max Auto, is it? And the one day he said the one Chinese guy came to their booth and he was showing his collection. The name is Maxa. It's like all of the brand, like a font, everything same. Design is the same. And he's proud to say that I have a brand, Maxa. It's like you are following me.
Thank you so much.
So B&B, their director, they are very surprised. Right? So this kind of they have this experience in the past.
Yes.
Yeah,
I've heard crazy stories about
but now
catalogs that of product that hasn't not yet even been launched.
Japan had
that are already on the market in China. Crazy stuff.
How are you positioning yourself in that market to be?
I think we have to keep conversation. We are communicating with them. Of course, we have sales guys, business development guys in Milan. So they're also communicating to let them understand who we are and what is our responsibility from Asia, not only China. I think it's the origin of production is not so important for us because every country or every manufacturer has a different strengths. Some of the company, for example, if you say Cautel is good for plastic production, and if you say Flexform, it's more like upholstery. Right? It's every manufacturer has different strengths. I think it's more important the story or what is the DNA of the brands. That's important.
They have accepted, though, companies on the show floor at Salone del Mobile, like Maruni, for example. Japanese company.
It's not easy. Even Maruni, they took more than 10 years to get in.
No, I'm sure it's not easy. But also many Scandinavian.
But I think what Stellar Works represent is the next generation, as you've been talking about, of this new sort of more informed China, this new generation that's more sophisticated, that's looking for quality.
Yeah.
So your market's growing, you're kind of the prototype, you're the first, so I can see this being a little bit of a like opening
but
this
it
door.
depends on the organizer side, because if I say Maison Objet, they came to us and they are trying to find like a new brands or like a fast-growing brands they want to catch as a pioneer, and they invited us to the Maison in Paris, and they gave us a best stand. It's different because Maison, they want to be like a pioneer of design industry.
But also,
maybe
France
Fela is more like they are
have the
protecting.
doesn't have the same stakes
wouldn't-
because they don't have the same
When you're
size of a furniture manufacturing industry. It's much smaller.
Yeah.
So there's not so much at risk for them.
Have sense like it is still difficult.
Yes, still, yeah, lots
Difficult
of
and inevitable.
You know, from because we're working with some Italian makers and some other European makers and some of the makers you talk to, they're dismissive because Chinese company. It's a built-in bias, and other companies that are more secure in who they are and what they do, and they understand the quality that comes from, and what they're doing. They see it as a kind of recognition that you're working for good companies.
Yeah.
And so it's really but there is a bias there. There's a deep bias against foreign companies in general, outside of Italy companies coming into the fair. It's not easy if you are outside of Italy getting good booths and good positions in the fair.
We have another.
With the product from China, because we are Japanese French company, but not Chinese. But production in China and export to Milan, they are so nervous, I think. So we keep conversations. One day, we will be there, I believe, and that we have to be our bridge to the next generation, I believe. Yeah.
We have one more question.
It's more of an observation. I've been in design for 30 years now, but I'm actually on the manufacturing side now. So this is a very interesting topic for tonight. Basically, I think from a manufacturing point of view in North America, the only thing that we have right now over Chinese companies or products is to be able to say, ours is much better quality. You can rely on what we do. You don't know what some of the stuff from Asia is like. So I think it's one of the biggest threats. Somebody mentioned threat earlier on. I think it's a huge threat that this whole new kind of thought process is going into the manufacturing industry, because that's really, because you're still going to be working at a certain price point, which is going to be a lot lower than what North America can produce. So if you're producing the quality as well as that, there is nothing that can compete with that.
But it's already happened in fashion and other industries.
Well, there's certain things, flooring, that's what I'm in now, hardwood flooring. And, the Asian products that I'm across look absolutely beautiful. And sometimes like a third of the price. But, all we can do right now is say, well, you can rely on our quality control. You can see it being made. If there's a problem, the history. You don't have that same knowledge in an Asian company, an Asian manufacturing product. But if it's changing, I can see this being it's actually very scary.
But if you take the example of flooring, and you take wood flooring, Canada actually exports lumber to Germany to manufacture flooring and brings it back to Canada. And if you take, is Denison, George, who makes the super wide planks from Europe and stuff, kind of they're specialists with a very special kind of floor. And so I think that the future of Canada and other places like that is specialization and uniqueness of product and capabilities. It's not, if you kind of base it on a kind of simpler equation, you will lose.
Like now to be able to just be able to distinguish it.
Yep.
That is the number one kind of go-to thing.
Yep.
Well, our quality is much better.
Yeah,
But if that's
it's going to change. It is changing.
I would say.
Yeah.
We are not competing like a price point, but price must be affordable, right, for the market. Because if it's too expensive, nobody buy. It's not a business. But to be honest, we have a factory in France. We have a factory in Shanghai. So we know, because that's why our company is very unusual. We know we have two different manufacturing platform. And to be honest, there are lots of difficulty in Europe. I would say the actual cost per hour is nearly 9 times. Wow. Still 9 times China, Shanghai, and a French factory. But the difficulty is also different challenges. We have just 35 hours in a week. It's a strict regulation by French government. We are not allowed to do any overwork. So we have to shut down from Friday to Sunday, and a long summer vacation, long Christmas vacation. So that means our mentality and mindset is, we have an order, and it's like a Yabu Pushelberg project. Furniture is always last-minute order, and we have to rush. Sorry. And we have to rush for the delivery. It's a procurement.
Give me the little violin.
Well, that's
we have to fight with the budget. We have to deliver on time. Yeah. And it's always like lots of
food chain.
Yeah.
After architects, structural engineers, mechanical engineers go through all it and burn through the budget. There's this much left to make the project complete. Yeah, exactly.
You have only 35 hours in a week, right?
Yep.
And our mentality is how to finish this order, right? How to complete the furniture within 35 hours. That means we have no space to consider like handmade detailing. Yeah. It's like a more and more machine-made or outsourcing, and just simplify the production and make it on time. Because time is so limited. And even 1 hour cost is so expensive. Just 1 hour, I asked him to upholster 1 hour. It's nearly same as a chair cost in China. Mm-hmm. So that means we can do handmade piece. Our French factory is doing for Hermes. It's a very expensive sofa and chair. But it's a customer must be affordable for this price, and the project is impossible. So that means, except these kind of high-end projects, most of the order project, we cannot think about like a detailing or handmade. It's physically difficult, even our furniture technician, they have. So that's why we bring the know-how and like a knowledge to Shanghai. And the cost is affordable, and Chinese worker, they're very good quick learning, and we can show the handmade craftsmanship without compromise any value engineering. Still cost is affordable, so we can show better material or better handmade production. And we have a way to make our owner happy. And they want to use for a long time. That's a happy solution for everybody, is it? So this is what we're doing.
Well, there are some things that end up on the cutting room floor when you make those kind of decisions. I mean, it is about quality of life also for the society, which is why you have a price in one place that's much higher than in another. So it depends on how we want to live also.
I think that we kind of brushed over that last point, and I think that if you fly often enough to places like Beijing, you won't want to stay there more than a day or two because the air is so bad, and you do feel the effects, and you kind of worry about the people that live there because their lifespan is shortened because of the environment. And China, of course, recognizes what they've done.
All costs are not considered.
All costs are, human costs are not considered. But that has happened in every society.
Yes, absolutely. We have one more question coming from Ziba over here.
The government.
Government's forcing interchange.
Yeah. Have you given up?
Italy.
Italy.
And I just wanted to say something because there was quite a bit talking about Italy, and I'm representing Italy, I guess, Sergio. But anyway, no doubt, no country in the whole world at this very moment can compete with China for a few reasons. I'm talking about furniture industry. One is government policy they have. China is one of the most, maybe first importer of softwood lumber in the whole world. So obviously they have cheap product in terms of material. No doubt of manpower, the number of people that they are available there to work. However, they are not capable in terms of quality coming up with other countries, unfortunately. They are great in terms of mass production, but they cannot master in single production because of lack of skills, basically.
That's not what we're hearing tonight.
No.
Eva.
Lately they improved a lot, but lack of skill of single worker. They learn quickly. They can work, but they don't have time to dedicate to the single product that they work.
Think on a mass level,
right.
I think that's all very true.
Absolutely. Mass production, they're great. So I don't think it's possible for any country to compete with them. China is the second country exporter of furniture to Canada. First is US, according to 2016 data. Italy still is the fifth country exporting to Canada. But the problem is China, or maybe other Asian countries, they all have low and medium quality product. In terms of medium and high quality, then Italy comes forward, lighting industry, fashion industry, leather industry, all kinds of products in that. But low and medium quality, price-wise, no other country so far can compete with China. And I think Catherine was mentioning about Salone del Mobile and Chinese companies visiting or participating at the show. To this point, not to my knowledge, China is a threat for Italian companies because they know what kind of product China can produce. So copying a high quality product in terms of material, time, because it's a piece of art. It's nothing that can easily be copied. Maybe appearance somehow can be similar, but absolutely in terms of finishing, they cannot compete. And we have every year many delegates taking to Italy from Canada, Canadian companies, architects, buyers, they go. And we equally have Chinese delegates. A huge amount of marketing product and marketing activities are dedicated to China.
I think Italy also exports a lot to China, particularly in high-end luxury goods and other goods. But I think we are hearing tonight that there are
China is improving
in some
very
places
much.
in China.
No doubt, is improving very much, but
the situation is changing.
I don't think it's going to decimate what Italy is in its industry. I think it's just going to make it more become more agile and change.
I have to say that when you go to Venice now, for example, I don't know if anybody's been there in the last 5 or 6 years, but and you walk into practically any cafe in Venice, and they're all your cappuccinos are being made by Chinese.
Really?
That's the truth. And we need to wrap now. So thank you all very much for coming. It was a really interesting discussion. Thanks to the panelists.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for hosting.
All right.